Ladies and gentlemen, and all your clones, copies, and fetches, get ready for a slightly sideways adventure as we pit Outer Limits against Alfred Hitchcock Presents. This is Put Up Your Spooks! This week's theme?
Knockoffs. We are going with off-brand shows, not Tales from the Crypt, not Tales from the Dark Side, or Monsters, Goosebumps,
Right.
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Off Put Up Your
Nothing
Spooks
like
brand shows.
So we are exploring the outer limits of shows, you could say.
There is nothing wrong with your television. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are now controlling the transmission. We control the horizontal and the vertical. We can deluge you with 1,000 channels or expand one single image to crystal clarity and beyond.
Any relatively young person who stumbles on this now is going to be like, the vertical and the horizontal? What the fuck is that?
Yeah, they really dated themselves when they hardwired that into the intro.
So anyway, my episode of Outer Limits. Think like a dinosaur. The Earth is poisoned and dying. It's in the future. Up on a space station, there's a guy who's giving some new recruit the rundown. He's telling this guy, like, you know, you've removed all your jewelry and contact lenses. You haven't eaten anything for 12 hours. And the guy's like, yep. He gives him this goo to drink, and they go into a room, and suddenly this crazy mechanical voice says, and they look over to their left, and behind a sheet of glass, there's this fucking dinosaur. And he's talking in a weird language, but there's like a mechanical translation device that sounds exactly like the Daleks. So this new recruit gets into a pod. The guy who was giving him a rundown, Michael, tells him, you gotta breathe, even when the goo covers you. You gotta get every one of your mucous membranes all covered in goo. So he's in this big clear sphere, the recruit, and it shuts down on him like Darth Vader's pod. And there's all these hoses, so I assumed they were just going to blast the set with like fire hoses, you know. But instead, like a CG Matrix goo covers him from foot to head, and it goes in his mouth. And then the dinos are like, hold for confirmation. And apparently his teleportation, that's what they're doing on this space station. They're teleporting people to another planet, I think. The problem is that when you teleport the person, there's still a copy of them left behind. So as soon as they get confirmation...
Yeah, there's a redundancy.
Yeah.
Because they want to make sure that the person teleported successfully.
So they get confirmation that he was teleported properly, and Michael pushes a button, which instantly incinerates the body left behind, a.k.a.
balancing the equation.
Thank you. Because they can't have two copies of these people. A little while later, a new assistant comes to the space station, Will, and Michael's kind of explaining how the dinos do things and the whole setup. And very soon after, a new shuttle comes with another jumper. There's a woman inside, Kamala, who's going on a 2-year research study before she'll be returning back to Earth, which they say is uncommon. Most people just want to flee Earth. They're doing a pilot program right now to kind of test the technology. They only let a couple hundred people of the like thousands of applicants into the program, and they're also testing the humans' worthiness to receive the technology. And at the slightest misstep, the dinos will pull the technology and leave the humans to their fates. So Kamala wants to see the chamber even though it's against regulations, and Michael takes her because he's kind of sweet on her, I think. She sees the button which balances the equation, and he tells her what it is, and she knows all about it. She knows that the people get incinerated after they teleport, and I kind of thought that was interesting because I was like, oh, here's a moment of tension. Like, you know, they don't obviously... You're not going to tell them that their bodies and consciousnesses are still left behind and they're going to get incinerated, but the story's not about that. So she asks him, like, isn't it hard, you know, to do what you have to do? And he says, like, I have 4 advanced degrees and I don't think about it for a moment. It's so important to balance the equation that I press that button no matter what. And she's like, whoa, sorry, holy shit. So then a dino comes in and is like, get the fuck out, you cannot be here.
This is irregular. You will follow protocol. The jumper will return to quarters.
And he's like, sorry, jeez. So he does explain that the dinos are like completely without emotion. They're vegetarians. all they care about is, I don't know, being logical or whatever. Because Will, the new assistant, is asking him all these questions about whether the dinos, give him the creeps or whatever. And speaking of Will, we see him alone in his chambers, and he's talking into a little communicator, and he says, "No one suspects anything. I'm in there. 10-4, good buddy. Over and out." And some voice on the communicator's like, "Good job. Keep it going." So during the night, because Kamala has to wait 12 hours before she goes on her jump, because she has to let her body adjust to the atmosphere or whatever, she and Michael get to know each other. They kind of bond a little bit. Cut to Will again talking to his people over his little communicator. He's kind of assessing Michael's mental state and says he seems fine so far. On the day of the jump, Kamala gives Michael her little meditation sphere for safekeeping, which is a little crystal ball that shows you how you're feeling, I guess. It's kind of like a mood ring.
Yeah, the height of technology on this planet, this alien civilization she's going to, are mood rings.
So Kamala gets into the jump chamber on that morning, and he's telling her to calm down, blah, blah, blah. She does her jump, but something happens, and it gets interrupted, and the dinos shut it all down, and they release her from her silver cocoon thing before he can incinerate her. His finger has been hovering over the incinerate button this whole time, and I'm here to tell you, you should not hover your finger over a button unless you're 100% sure you want to push that button. Because one time, I was controlling the audio at a telethon, and these kids were doing this choreographed routine to this song, and I knew it was going to end soon, and I wanted to be able to end the music right at the right spot so it wouldn't jump to the next track, so I hovered my finger over the button, and my finger involuntarily pushed the button and canceled the music halfway through the performance during a live telethon, and then they had to redo the whole thing.
So at that point, then you had to balance the equation so the telephone could go on.
I just murdered everyone and shut down the cameras. I'm just saying, fingers have minds of their own. So Kamala wakes up screaming and has a psychotic episode for an hour, and Michael's really upset, telling the dino, and the dinos are like, "She's fine. Don't worry about it. She's all good." And he's like, "Yeah, after I calmed her down from her psychotic episode." And they're like, "Whatever. We'll contact you when we have information." They leave the chamber, and Will is asking all kinds of pointed questions, but Michael's a super genius with 4 advanced degrees. He sees through Will immediately and asks him a complex question about teleportation, which Will can't answer. So he slams him up against the wall, and he's like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And he's like, "I'm just a psychiatrist, and I'm here to evaluate your mental state so we don't have another breach of conduct like with the last guy." And that's it. I assumed he was going to be a Nedry character that was there to steal technology. But no, the story is not concerned with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought he was maybe there to spy on the aliens,
Yeah,
or steal the technology.
Because he was being very shady.
Yeah, or maybe even start a war with that alien civilization or something, end this whole alliance. Nah, he was just a shrink.
Just a shrink. Which realistically you'd probably have when your job is just to incinerate people. Michael goes back to Kamala. He's trying to calm her down, and he gets closer to her emotionally. He tells her about his wife dying of basically an allergic reaction to Earth's poisoned atmosphere, and he says, his daughter could easily go the same way because they obviously share DNA. Then the dinos are like, "Transmission successful, balance the equation," and he's like, "Oh shit," because now he likes her, and she's still her. She still has her whole consciousness. First he tries to put her in the pod, and she refuses because she knows exactly what's going to happen. And then, he likes her so much, he tries to smuggle her out on the next shuttle, and Will, the psychotherapist, is like, "No, you understand how this works. You got to kill that bitch, no matter what." And the dinos are like, "Kill the bitch, kill the bitch."
You will balance the equation.
And there's a lot at stake here, because if they don't get this teleportation system working, most people are going to die on Earth. Because, just to go to the planet of the mood rings, where Kamala wants to go, would take 100 years, through normal conventional travel. So it's basically sacrifice the future of the planet Earth or kill the bitch.
Oh, right. So it's a tough question, and also sacrifice your daughter, who's probably going to die on Earth. And he's really struggling with it, but in the end he decides, I can't go through with it. I have to save her. It's too much. So he puts her in the airlock to meet up with the shuttle, but then images of his dead wife and his daughter start flashing through his mind, he's holding the mood ring ball, which is completely blood red, and at the last minute he makes the decision to blast her out the airlock. And actually, he doesn't even blast her. He opens the airlock, and she slowly dies because her hand slowly like sweeps down the window.
Yeah, she probably freezes against the door and will have to be chiseled off at a later point.
She freezes against the door while all her blood boils.
Yeah.
It's the harshest possible death sentence.
Yeah, so for a while he was running around the space station with the gun, but he was never planning to just execute Kamala. The gun was there to, like, scare off the psychiatrist that was trying to stop him, or to hijack the space shuttle in case they wouldn't let her on board.
Right. Well, I think he was kind of going back and forth constantly
Shooting
in his head. Because at one point he comes into her quarters with the gun and she clubs him over the head, and then he points the gun at her and she's like, "Oh, just make it quick." But then he has a second thought. So I think he's like in incredible turmoil over his decision. But yeah, of course, in the end,
it's a real dilemma.
Yeah, just does it in the most gruesome way possible. So, and then, 2 years later, the other version of her gets beamed back, and she's like, "Oh, hey, it's me. Hey, you were really nice to me 2 years ago when you sent me on my way." And he's just like dead inside, and he's like, "That was somebody else." And the dinos are like, very good.
That's the shit right there.
At one point,
Very good.
the dinos, even when they're like trying to get him to put her in the chamber, they're like, "Terminate, terminate."
You must terminate the redundancy.
Towards the end, I really thought, again, like, I was looking for all the obvious story points, I guess. I honestly thought it was all going to be a test at the end to see, because the guy was there to psychoanalyze him. The dinos were really watching him at every minute to make sure that humanity was going to be able to go through with their end of the bargain. And Kamala was, like, desperately, trying to play up. She was, like, hysterical and, like, refusing to go back in the chamber. So I was like, okay, they're evaluating him and seeing what he'll do. Like, I kind of thought it was like, oh, are they testing whether he'll spare her life so that they see that humanity is, like, inherently good? Are they testing him to see whether he'll go through with it, to see if they can trust the technology? But that wasn't the case either. It wasn't a test at all.
Yeah, I mean, from the second Kamala got on the space station, she's like, "Let's break protocol." And it did start to, I mean, it was a test in many ways.
Just not a planned one. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it just wasn't a planned test. But I agree, it did feel like that because he was under such heavy scrutiny by both sides, the dinos and the humans.
Right.
Pretty lean storytelling.
Transmission has been received without corruption.
My episode was Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And in the 80s, this show ran with Alfred Hitchcock doing little, like, skits and intros before every episode. And this is one I used to watch as a kid. And I just got so excited listening to the theme music. In this episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, when I was looking up episode descriptions, it was called Romance Machines. But I could only find it online under the title of Mirror Mirror. It starts off in the future. And we know we're in the future because there's a giant building with a holographic sign circling the building. Not only that, but it says, like, working to give you the best future, Future Base Incorporated, which is a great name for a sci-fi company and a sci-fi show. So, Jack, the CEO of Future Base Incorporated, is suffering through a workout, and he's bitching and moaning at his android trainer. The trainer is like, "That's right, sir. Get the venom out. You'll live longer." He's like, "All right. Well, I think you're a shitty trainer." And so he insults the trainer and leaves, and he goes to his secretary, who is vapid but beautiful, Paulette, and played by Diane Franklin. Ryan, where do you recognize Diane Franklin from?
Well, I immediately recognize her from Bill and Ted, where she was one of the princesses.
Yeah, she was Princess Elizabeth in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
I think more famously from Better Off Dead.
That's right. She was Monique, the French girl. I was like, why am I instantly madly in love with this girl? Oh, right.
My
Monique
childhood.
From, Better Off Dead. Jack storms into his office and he asks his secretary, the beautiful but vapid Paulette, if there's been any word from the company's chief scientist, Edgar. And she says that he never talks to anyone and he's been kind of locked up in the lab for like 3 weeks. So we see Edgar, this disheveled scientist, sleeping at his desk. And he gets up and he goes and looks at Paulette and he daydreams about just throwing down and macking on her and just sucking face and making sweet, sweet love to her. And so he meets up with Jack, the CEO, and he begs him to stop by his house that night to discuss a personal issue that's interfering with his work. So when Jack gets to his house, he's greeted not by a slovenly, disheveled scientist, but by a suave, sophisticated Edgar with slick back hair and a silk smoking jacket. And Edgar is like, oh, I leave that crazy scientist look for the office. And he's swilling brandy and, you know, traipsing about his fine house. And Jack is like, all right, it's 9 o'clock at night. What do you want? And Edgar says, you know, I have a problem. My problem is I'm in love. And I'm in love with Paulette, your secretary. And I'm a genius, obviously, but when it comes to women, I'm an idiot. I just completely unable to talk to women, you know? I'm this great inventor. I'm rich and brilliant, but I've just got no way with words. I've got no game. So I came up with this plan.
We have cyborgs that can cook. We have cyborgs that can clean and make war. Why not a cyborg that can court women? Programmed for the language of love.
Or you could just create a love bot. I mean, Jesus Christ.
We will circle back to that because obviously that was like the first hard wrench of the wheel off of what makes any kind of sense. Jack is super hyped to sell these romance bots, but Edgar will only release the designs to the company after it has been tested and proven with Paulette. Jack is into it, you know, he agrees to the deal, but he wonders if a robot can really fool anyone into thinking they're Edgar, and then the real Edgar steps into the room. Eddie is the suave robot double, and he's already fooled Jack. The plan is a go, and Paulette comes by the next night.
Female at front door.
So while Jack and Edgar observe, Eddie the robot wines and dines Paulette.
What is it?
It's called a book. It's a prevalent form of entertainment and education in the pre-laser era. I have several of them, but that's my favorite.
So after he's successfully wined and dined Paulette, Eddie asks her to join him on a journey of love and discovery, a metaphorical journey on the road to love. But she stops him right there, and she says, I can only give myself to a man who knows how to take it to the bone zone. And so that's
Quote.
Edgar's cue. So he tags in for the robot and gets down to business. The next morning at Future Base Incorporated, Jack is upset because Paulette hasn't come into work and his schedule's all messed up. Edgar arrives. He's looking very satisfied. And he announces that he and Paulette will be getting married by the end of the week. And after that, he'll turn over the plans for the romance bots to Jack to mass market. Jack is psyched. He offers Edgar some low-sodium scotch. They enjoy a quick drink, and then Edgar's like, all right, I gotta go. So he bounces. Twist. Paulette comes out from hiding. She was in Jack's office the whole time, and she's learned how to build the robots from Edgar. She and Jack are secretly in cahoots. So that night, they go back to Edgar's, and Jack freezes when he sees Edgar on the couch watching some old hologram movie, and Paulette's like, oh, that's just Eddie, the robot double. He's built with an amusement circuit, and he only functions at full capacity when he has a couple laughs a day. And they're like, all right. So they go up the stairs while Eddie the robot watches this movie and laughs. So they sneak into Edgar's bedroom, and this is wild. Jack just sits on his bed, and it was like, guess what? I'm double-crossing you. And he's like, huh? What's going on? He's like, I'm here to seal the deal. He's like, I thought we already concluded our deal. He's like, no, the real deal is that Paulette's in love with me, not with you. And to prove it, we're going to sit on your bed with you in it and make out with each other. Which, I don't know. I mean, look, I'm on the record as saying I'd make out with Paulette too.
Way to rub it in.
But, yeah, it seems a bit petty to do it on the man's bed. I guess he felt it was deserved since he had to watch Edgar
True enough.
take Paulette to the bone zone. So he whips out this skinny little laser pistol and fucking murders Edgar. So they take the body downstairs out into the backyard, bury it, and then they go back in and they're like, hey, robot double, we've got a new job for you. You're going to come to the lab and you're going to act like the chief scientist. Only it's not Eddie. It's the real Edgar. He knew they'd betray him, so he put the robot double in his bed. And Jack is like, well, that's a shame, but I guess I'm going to murder you again. You know, no big. Hey, Paulette, hand me that skinny little laser pistol. Twist. She's not in love with Jack. She's actually in love with Edgar. Twist. She's actually a robot double. She's a robot double of Paulette that killed the original Paulette with poison. And so Edgar explains that the romance machine detected that the real Paulette was resisting him and deduced she was in a relationship with Jack. Therefore, Edgar decided he'd rather have a woman with a mechanical soul than a woman with no soul.
Burn.
Yeah. So Jack's like, all right, but, you know, so you got the girl, big deal. What are you going to do about it? And he's like, hello? And so who should step into the room behind Jack but Jack's robot double? Yes, there's another robot double. So Jack is freaking out. He's sweating. They've got him good. And he's like, you can't shoot me. You can't kill me. What are you going to do? And they're like, oh, don't worry, I couldn't kill you, Jack. I'm going to let your trainer do that for me. And so then the Irish trainer comes in and is like, I'm here to get the venom out, sir. The show ends with Edgar reading Cyrano de Bergerac to his robot lover. The end.
I was like, that scientist is a piece of shit. Like, he's willing to, like, fake out this woman and take advantage of her. I hope he dies. And then the evil, quote-unquote, CEO was like, haha, I got the drop on you, I'm going to murder you. And I was like, good. It's what he deserves. He sucks. And then it was like, no, now you're evil, and I'm going to get the drop on you. You suck. And I was like, who sucks? I don't know who to root for. And then he was like, well, where's my secretary? And our hero, the scientist, is like, oh, killed her. And I was like, what? Why? Why did she need to die?
You'd have a hard case trying to say that Edgar the nerd is the good guy in this story.
Nobody's the good guy. Maybe the robots.
Jack the CEO, his betrayal is so strange.
Yeah, why would he do that? This is a golden goose. It's like Iron Man 1. What the fuck's he thinking?
Edgar is the chief brain at his company that builds androids at Future Base Incorporated. And his new product line is going to be these romance bots, for some reason instead of sex bots, which we all thought he was talking about.
Well, a new line of bots that can take advantage of people and trick them into having sex with pathetic people. It's like it should have been called Incel Corp.
Future Base Incel?
Yeah.
Yeah, they've all read the game. They've been programmed. They know how to neg women. So Edgar the scientist makes a deal, which is, I'm going to build this robot. We're going to test it and prove it. And then and only then will I turn over the plans to the company. And Jack, the CEO, is like, or I could fake you out. I could cheat the test and then murder you, and then take possession of these untested robots and mass produce those, and then I'll fix them in a way that you couldn't. Like, it made zero logical sense.
If Teen Wolf has taught us anything, it's that a man will go to great lengths to protect his booty.
Paulette is in love with me. Real love, Edgar. With a real man.
First, I would like to note, before we get carried away, that the actor who played the trainer is one Barclay Hope. He was the father in the Goosebumps episode we covered, Piano Lessons Can Be Murder.
Holy shit.
And for those keeping score at home for the Terror EGOT, Barclay has been in Twilight Zone, 2 episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Friday the 13th the series, The Hitchhiker, Goosebumps, and R.L. Stein's The Haunting Hour.
Wow, we have a new contender. Although I think I cut all that stuff out about the EGOTs. I can't remember.
That's okay. We'll get it in there somehow.
Before I could commit myself to the kind of thing you're talking about, I would have to know you physically first.
I mean, I think we've said all we need to say. Shall we just get right into ratings?
So, for How to Think Like a Dino, Psi Factor.
Psi Factor high. You got teleportation. You got
high.
English translated dinos. You got dino vegetarians.
Various alien races.
Space stations.
Mood-changing gems.
Cyberpunk tattoos.
Space guns.
Yeah.
Polluted future Earth.
Clones.
Pretty awesome.
Sci-fi was sky high.
Sky high.
Sky high sci-fi.
For Romance Machines, Psi Factor.
High, not as high. There were robots. There were sentient robots.
I don't know if they were sentient.
I don't think they actually were sentient now that I'm thinking about it, because they seem to really just obey commands.
But they had limits to what they would take. Like,
Yeah.
you could only push them so far.
Right.
So it wasn't as far in the future.
Sci Factor high-ish, and they also had low-resolution hologram TV, which played the Star Spangled Banner at the end of the broadcast day.
They communicated through crystals. It was
did you notice
post-laser era.
when he was watching TV, the Edgar who was pretending to be the Edgar bot, he like stood up and saluted the flag at the end of the broadcast hour. And then I can only assume the low resolution hologram TV cut to static.
Yeah. Well, first the Indian graphic came on,
and this
then it went to static.
Show was on cable, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Magnificent. No gross factor in this episode, I'd say.
The grossness of taking advantage of poor, defenseless women who are then taking advantage of poor, defenseless nerds. Everyone taking advantage of everyone sexually. Gross.
Okay, the grossness of murdering people just for being clones?
That was clean murder. They just turned to ash, and they knew that they were going to get turned to ash, so...
It's true, it was whaling...
The mercury chloride-based drink they had to drink was apparently kind of gross, because everyone made a face before they drank it. And the continued mention of mucous membranes.
Fair enough. Okay. Outer limits, body count. 0 because the equations were balanced.
The equations were balanced. We have at least one because dead wife. We have counted off-screen deaths in the past.
Okay. I'll give you 1. Whereas for Romance Machines, body count 2. Outer limits, what the factor?
I think what the factor... low, except that I kept thinking things were going to go this way, and then they instead went this way. Like, I kept thinking it was going to be a test, this guy was going to be evil, etc., and so on. But none of what I was thinking happened.
Yeah.
But still low.
It didn't bump you out of the show so hard that you were
right.
like, what the...
Whereas...
Romance Machines, what the factor...
Sky high. Sci-fi sky high.
Sky high. Sci-fi sky high. Sure, you could watch quality shows about moral dilemmas, but it's the what the factor that keeps me coming back.
I mean, in terms of sheer what the factor, I think this week's winner is
Definitely.
Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Do you think it was right to kill Kamala?
Certainly not in the way that he did.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal.
Yeah, too brutal. I mean, I don't know. You know, the balance of humanity is at stake, and her consciousness will come back. But, you know, I don't know. I think it's a pretty fucked up technology that creates two perfect copies of someone and then kills one of them. You know, if they had built it so that it teleports you and doesn't create the redundancy, you'd have to absolutely know what you were getting into going in, and as a recruit know that it might not work, and then you could make that decision. But the copy of you that gets left behind doesn't get to make that decision whether to live or die.
But it already has, because it's the same person that agreed to be destroyed upon successful transmission.
I suppose that's true, but they're also told that they will go to sleep on the space station and wake up on the other planet.
True.
And
which is true.
They aren't told that they could potentially wake up and be, as far as we know, completely conscious and aware and still exactly themselves. Like, your mind doesn't get wiped during the jump.
Yeah, you'd think the goop they make you drink would maybe have some kind of, or the goo that covers your body. I mean, I guess it's complicated enough to teleport you to another star system. They can't be adding in time-release poisons or some kind of explosive tag that would activate.
Well, but that's the same. That's the same as just incinerating them after the fact. You know.
The equation needs to be balanced.
Stop saying that! If you're gonna do this, then at least call it by what it is. You need to kill me. Just say it.
I need to kill you.
I didn't realize you were going to be so incensed by Edgar's plan to build a romance machine to lead Paulette.
Well, I believe in equality.
It is weird that a scientist would try to build a romance bot instead of a sex bot, but don't you think that shows that he isn't some sleazy guy that just wants to build a sex bot? Like, he's
just a sleazy guy who wants to trick a woman into sleeping with him under false pretenses.
If I could play the devil's robot double, I would say that Edgar probably didn't plug his robot double into the internet and just been like, look up a bunch of romance. He programmed all the things to say and do into Eddie the robot. Like, those were his words and thoughts, his designs. He created Eddie to communicate the love and romance and suaveness that he himself could not embody.
Yeah, well, tough titties.
Non-combination of transmission retriever. Do not balance equation. Aborting procedure.
What's happening? Why am I covered in goo?
Why are we naked?
Are we still doing this podcast? Rerun for your life!